My name is Cassandra, and the day I found out that everyone in my family had been invited to my cousin's wedding, everyone except me, I felt like the floor gave way beneath my feet. The news didn't come gently. It wasn't whispered, it wasn't softened. It hit me like a slap to the face. I saw the photos, the group chat buzzing with excitement, my aunts and uncles sharing dress fittings, cousins posting about the big day. And when I asked my mother why I hadn't gotten an invitation, she didn't even blink. She looked at me with that coldness I'd known since childhood and said, "You'll ruin her day, Cassandra. It's better if you just don't come." That sentence, it carved something into me. I wanted to scream, to ask her what made me so unworthy, so shameful, that even celebrating love became something I was forbidden from. My brother was invited. My sister was invited. Even distant relatives I barely recognized were on the list. But me? I was left out intentionally, as if my presence was poison. I wanted to hide, to disappear. But something inside me twisted into fire instead. I thought, fine, if they don't want me at their celebration, I'll make my own. And it will be louder, brighter, unforgettable. They thought I'd sit at home and cry. They thought I'd be the embarrassed outcast, the pitiful cousin whose absence no one would notice. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that I had a plan. A plan that would make sure none of them ever looked down on me again. Before I tell you how I turned humiliation into the grandest moment of my life, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss what comes next. The day I discovered that everyone in my family had been invited to my cousin Amelia's wedding, everyone except me, was the day something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't even Amelia who told me. It was the internet. I was scrolling through Instagram on a quiet evening, sipping on lukewarm coffee, when the first photo popped up. My aunt, smiling wide, holding a lacy dress in a boutique, captioned, "For Amelia's big day." Can't believe it's just a month away. I blinked, confused. Big day? Then another post followed. My sister, gushing about being a bridesmaid. Then my brother, joking about how he couldn't wait to embarrass himself on the dance floor. I kept scrolling, my heart pounding harder with every swipe. Post after post, laughter, hashtags, excitement. And with each one, the truth pressed tighter against my chest. I hadn't been invited. My throat went dry. I tossed my phone onto the couch as though it burned me. This had to be a mistake. Amelia and I weren't close, sure, but we weren't enemies either. We'd grown up together, spent summers playing in the same backyard, shared secrets during sleepovers. She had once called me her other sister, so why would she leave me out? I stormed into the kitchen where my mother was slicing vegetables for dinner. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling, Did you know Amelia's getting married?" She didn't look up. "Of course." My stomach dropped. "Of course. And you didn't think to tell me?" Finally, she set the knife down and turned to face me. Her eyes, cold and sharp, scanned me like I was a nuisance standing in her way. "There's no invitation for you, Cassandra," she said flatly. "It's better that way." My lips parted. "Better for who?" "For everyone." She sighed as though she was tired of having to explain the obvious. "You'll ruin her day. You always, somehow, make things about you. Amelia deserves to shine without any distractions." The words cut deeper than any knife could. "I'm her cousin," I whispered, choking back the tears pressing against my throat. How could my presence ruin her wedding? Her gaze hardened. "Because you, always different, always so dramatic, always so loud. People will whisper. Amelia deserves peace on her wedding day, not gossip." I stood frozen, my chest rising and falling as though I'd run a marathon. Different, loud, dramatic. It wasn't the first time she'd thrown those words at me like stones. My whole life had been a chorus of criticism, a constant reminder that I was never good enough, never like my siblings. My brother? The golden boy, straight-A student, steady job, family's pride. My sister? The perfect daughter, soft-spoken, obedient, beautiful in the way my mother always wished I had been. And me? The outsider. The black sheep. The girl who never fit in no matter how hard she tried. I clenched my fists. So I'm just… What? Nothing? I don't matter? You're overreacting, she said sharply, turning back to her vegetables. This is Amelia's wedding, Cassandra. Don't make it about you, but it already was. It always had been. I stumbled back into my room, slammed the door shut, and let myself collapse on the bed. My phone buzzed again, more photos. Amelia trying on her gown, my cousins squealing in the background. My siblings smiling like they were part of something magical. Something I had been deliberately, cruelly shut out of. Tears blurred my vision. I felt like the unwanted child all over again. The girl nobody wanted to sit with at lunch. The girl whispered about at family gatherings. The girl who was always too much. But as I lay there, chest heaving, something strange began to stir inside me. At first, it was just a flicker, a small, trembling spark. But the more I replayed my mother's words, "You'll ruin her day," the stronger it grew. Until it wasn't sadness filling my chest anymore. It was fire. If they thought I was going to sit quietly in the shadows, crying over their rejection, they were wrong. If they thought I would let them laugh behind my back while they celebrated without me, they didn't know me at all. I sat up, wiping my tears, my heart thundering with a new rhythm. Fine. If they don't want me at their celebration, I'll make my own, bigger, better, louder, a night they'll never forget. That was the exact moment my plan began to take shape. The next morning, I forced myself to smile when I passed my family at the breakfast table. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. My brother and sister whispered about wedding outfits. My mother asked my sister if she'd booked her salon appointment yet. Not one of them looked at me. Not one of them cared that I was being erased. I took a sip of my coffee, hiding the grin curling on my lips. They wanted me invisible. But soon I'd be unforgettable. For the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into planning. Every spare moment was dedicated to it. I stayed late at work to make extra calls. I scoured venues, caterers, and entertainment. And then, one night, I found it. The perfect spot. A sprawling beach house perched right on the edge of the ocean, with wide glass windows and a deck that seemed to stretch into the horizon. It wasn't just beautiful. It was breathtaking. When the event manager told me it was available for a weekend rental, I nearly cried with relief. I signed the contract on the spot. That beach house was going to be the stage for my grand statement. But hosting a party wasn't enough. I wanted this to sting, to leave a mark, to make them regret every word, every sneer, every time they shoved me aside. So I made the guest list carefully. I invited friends, colleagues, people my family barely knew but always tried to impress. People who would take photos. People who would talk, and then I made sure the whispers reached home. My brother overheard me on the phone with the caterer. My sister saw the new dress I'd bought hanging in my closet. My mother noticed the sudden energy in my step. And when they asked me about it, I just smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, nothing. Just something I'm working on." It drove them insane. By the time Amelia's wedding weekend arrived, the tension in my house was thick enough to choke on. I stayed quiet, watching as my family dressed in their finest clothes, their laughter ringing through the halls as they prepared to leave me behind. My mother kissed my sister's cheek. My father clapped my brother on the shoulder, and then just before they walked out, my mother turned to me with that same coldness in her eyes. "Don't do anything embarrassing while we're gone," she said. I smiled. "Don't worry, I won't." But deep down, I was already savoring the sweetness of what was to come. That night, while they were busy clinking champagne glasses at Amelia's wedding, I was standing barefoot on the deck of my beach house, the ocean breeze in my hair, surrounded by laughter, music, and people who actually wanted me there. My party wasn't just a success. It was magic. Fairy lights glowed like stars above us, the waves crashed in rhythm with the music, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider. I was the center. I watched as my guests toasted to me, as photos snapped left and right. as strangers whispered about how stunning the setup was, how radiant I looked. And somewhere in the distance, I imagined my family hearing about it. I imagined their faces when they realized I hadn't sat at home crying, but had thrown a celebration that rivaled Amelia's wedding. For once, the thought didn't make me ache. It made me smile, because this was only the beginning. The morning after my party, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications exploded across the screen. Tags, mentions, messages. My friends had posted pictures, clips, and stories from last night. Glittering lights, clinking glasses, and the ocean glowing behind us like a painting. Everywhere I looked, there was my face. Laughing, dancing, smiling in a way I hadn't smiled in years. And the comments. Oh, the comments! Cassandra, this looks like a dream. Girl, this was better than most weddings I've been to. When's the next one? Count me in. I scrolled and scrolled, my chest swelling with something I had been starved of all my life. Validation. Not from my family, but from the world outside them. Then came the one message that made me pause. It was from my cousin, Amelia. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling just slightly. Heard about your little event. Bold of you to throw it the same weekend as my wedding. Desperate much? My lips curled into a smirk. Desperate? No, strategic. I typed back quickly. Oh, Amelia, don't worry. Yours was sweet. But some of us like the ocean as our backdrop. I pressed send and tossed the phone aside, laughing under my breath. For once, it wasn't me shrinking in someone else's shadow. It was Amelia, furious that I had stolen some of her spotlight, and that was only the beginning. By evening, when my family returned home from the wedding, I was waiting in the living room, sipping tea like nothing had happened. My mother stormed in first, her eyes blazing. What did you do? She snapped. I raised my brows. Do? Don't play dumb, Cassandra. The entire family is talking about your beach spectacle. She spat the word like it was poison. While we were at Amelia's wedding, you were out there throwing some circus. I placed my cup gently on the table. Oh, that? Just a little gathering with friends. Little? My father's voice boomed as he entered. People said it was grander than the wedding itself. Do you know how embarrassing that is? For who? I asked calmly. Because from where I'm sitting, it doesn't sound like I'm the one embarrassed. Their silence was delicious. My brother and sister shuffled awkwardly behind them. My sister muttered. Everyone kept asking me why I wasn't at your party. It was humiliating. I tilted my head. Oh, so now you know how it feels? The words hit harder than I expected. They flinched, and for once I didn't feel guilty. Over the next few days, the tension in the house thickened. Whispers followed me wherever I went. My mother criticized me more sharply than ever. My father refused to look at me, and my siblings avoided me altogether. But what surprised me most was the shift outside these walls. Relatives who had once dismissed me now called to ask about my party. Colleagues treated me with a newfound respect. Even distant acquaintances wanted to know when my next event would be. It was as though, in one night, I had rewritten my identity. No longer the forgotten daughter, the failure, the outsider. Now I was something else. Someone who could command attention, and my family hated it. One night at dinner, my mother finally exploded. You think you've proven something with your little stunt, don't you? She sneered. But everyone knows who the real success in this family is. Amelia's wedding was elegant, traditional, respectable. Yours? Just noise. I set my fork down and met her eyes. Funny, because from what I hear, people are still talking about mine. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough, you're making a fool of yourself, Cassandra. You'll never measure up. Not to Amelia. Not to anyone. The old me would have cried, stormed off, maybe locked myself in my room. But not this time. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and let a slow smile spread across my face. You're right, I said softly. I'll never measure up to Amelia, because I don't need to. I'm already beyond her. The silence that followed was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The party had been my declaration. Yes, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. My family still thought of me as reckless, dramatic, undeserving. They hadn't truly felt the weight of what I could do, and if there was one thing I had learned from years of being humiliated, it was that revenge didn't have to be loud. Sometimes the quietest moves cut the deepest, so I began to plan again. This time, not just a party. Something bigger. Something they couldn't ignore, couldn't downplay, couldn't dismiss as noise. And as fate would have it, the perfect opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later, my mother announced we were hosting a family dinner at our house, a gathering to celebrate Amelia's new life as a married woman, of course. Another shrine to Amelia's perfection. As my siblings helped set the table and my parents fussed over details, I stayed quiet. But inside, I was buzzing with anticipation. Because this dinner, this was going to be my stage. I spent the entire day preparing, not in the kitchen, not with decorations, but with myself. I bought a new dress, deep emerald green, that clung to me like it had been made for my body. I styled my hair until it gleamed, painted my lips a bold shade of red, and when I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. I wasn't the shadow anymore. I was the storm. As relatives began to arrive, I could feel the shift in the air. Eyes widened, whispers followed me from room to room. For once, people weren't ignoring me. They were noticing me. And then Amelia walked in, glowing in her newlywed aura, arm hooked with her husband's. She gave me one look, up and down, and smirked, trying a little too hard. "Aren't we, Cassandra?" she said sweetly. I leaned closer, my smile razor sharp. "Funny. That's exactly what I was thinking about your wedding." Her smirk faltered. The dinner itself was a battlefield disguised in cutlery and candles. My family showered Amelia with compliments, raised toasts to her happiness, and laughed at her stories. I sat quietly, sipping my wine, letting their words wash over me, until my father cleared his throat and stood to speak. "I just want to say," he began, his gaze sweeping the table, "how proud I am of Amelia. She has achieved what every young woman should: marriage, stability, respect. She is an example for all of us." His eyes flicked to me just briefly, but long enough. "And of course," he added, "not everyone finds that kind of success. Some people waste their lives chasing attention instead of building something real." Laughter rippled across the table. I felt the burn in my chest, the sting of humiliation rising again. But instead of shrinking, I let it settle into a cold, steady determination. Because this was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I set my glass down, stood slowly, and let my eyes sweep across the table. Every face turned toward me, some curious, some mocking, some dismissive, and then I dropped the bombshell. "Funny you should mention building something real," I said calmly. "Because while you've all been busy underestimating me, I've been building something of my own." I reached into my purse and pulled out a sleek envelope. With deliberate slowness, I placed it in the center of the table and slid it toward my father. He frowned, confused, then opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, and his face went pale. Property deeds. Not just any property. The very house we were sitting in. The house everyone assumed belonged to my parents. Gasps echoed around the table as I leaned forward. "That's right," I said softly. "This house isn't yours anymore. It's mine. I bought it months ago, while you were too busy mocking me to notice." The room erupted in chaos, and that was the moment everything began to unravel. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Forks froze mid-air. Wine glasses hovered untouched. Even Amelia's perfect newlywed smile cracked as her eyes darted from the papers to my face, searching for some explanation, some reassurance that this was just another one of my dramatic games. But it wasn't. It was the truth. This has to be some kind of joke," my father stammered, his voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. You expect me to believe? You don't have to believe, I interrupted smoothly. You just have to read. Check the dates, the signatures. It's all legal. I made sure of it. My mother snatched the papers from him, scanning each line with frantic eyes. Her face went from disbelief to horror in seconds. How could you possibly afford this? She whispered, her voice sharp with both fear and fury. I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. Let's just say, I stopped spending my life chasing your approval and started chasing opportunities instead. While you were all so busy praising Amelia's every move, I was working, investing, planning. Amelia's husband, who up until this point had stayed quiet, finally leaned forward. So what are you saying? That we're all your guests in this house now? The corners of my mouth curled upward. Exactly. Gasps rippled around the table like waves. Amelia scoffed, trying to recover her composure. Well, congratulations, Cassandra. You've managed to buy some walls and a roof. That doesn't make you important. It just makes you desperate to prove yourself. I turned to her, my gaze steady. Maybe, but tell me this, Amelia. When people talk about this dinner tomorrow, do you think they'll be talking about your wedding? Or about me? Her face flushed crimson, her jaw tightening. I'd struck exactly where it hurt. The dinner ended in chaos. My parents retreated to their room, whispering angrily behind closed doors. Amelia stormed out with her husband, her heels clacking like gunshots against the floor. My siblings avoided me, darting their eyes away as if afraid of what I'd become. But me? I sat at the dining table long after everyone had gone, sipping the last of my wine, staring at the flickering candlelight. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the disappointment. I was the center of it all, and I wasn't done yet. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. News of what happened at the dinner spread quickly through the family grapevine. Everyone wanted to know if it was true. Had Cassandra really bought the house? Was she really in control now? Some relatives called me curious. Others sent passive-aggressive messages, pretending to be concerned but really just fishing for gossip. Even my co-workers treated me differently, like I was someone to be respected, someone who had power. It was intoxicating. But with power came resistance. My parents grew cold, barely speaking to me. When they did, it was sharp and bitter. My mother accused me of humiliating her, of tearing the family apart. My father accused me of betrayal, of being ungrateful. And Amelia, she doubled down on her perfection act. She posted endless pictures online, her honeymoon, her gifts, her happy little life. Each caption was a subtle jab. When you're truly loved, you don't need to prove yourself. Real success is measured by happiness, not money. It was pathetic, transparent, but it still stung. Because no matter how much I had achieved, no matter how much I had flipped the script, there was still a part of me that longed for something deeper, not just to be noticed, but to be valued. One night, as I sat on the balcony overlooking the ocean, I felt the weight of it pressing on me. The emptiness after the high, the silence after the chaos. I had the house. I had their attention, but I still didn't have their love, and maybe I never would. A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. I brushed it away angrily, refusing to let myself break. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Amelia. Enjoy the house while you can. Because sooner or later, Cassandra, everyone sees through you. And when they do, you'll be alone. Completely alone. I stared at the words, my chest tightening. For a moment, fear flickered through me. What if she was right? What if all of this was just temporary, a performance, and one day the curtain would fall? But then another thought sparked. What if I didn't let it fall? What if I kept building, kept rising, until there was no stage big enough to hold me? That night, I made a decision. The party was step 1. The house was step 2. Now it was time for step 3. I started small. Hosting gatherings, dinners, and events at my house. Inviting people outside the family, friends, colleagues, acquaintances who had once dismissed me. Each event was bigger, bolder, more unforgettable than the last. Soon, people weren't just coming. They were begging to be invited, and with every new event, my reputation grew. I wasn't Cassandra the disappointment anymore. I was Cassandra the hostess, Cassandra the owner, Cassandra the one who could make or break your social standing with a single invitation. My family watched in disbelief as I transformed right in front of them. And Amelia? She hated it. I could see it in her eyes every time we crossed paths. That flicker of jealousy she tried so hard to hide. That bitterness that grew sharper each time someone whispered my name instead of hers. But she couldn't stop me. No one could. Until one night, when everything changed, I was hosting my biggest event yet, a summer gala at the beach house. Lights strung across the sand, music pulsing in the air, champagne flowing like water. The guest list was a who's who of people who mattered, people who could elevate me even further. I was in my element, glowing, powerful, untouchable. Until I saw her. Amelia. She hadn't been invited. But there she was, walking across the sand in a shimmering gown, her husband trailing behind her. The crowd parted as she approached me, her smile sharp and cold. "Lovely party, Cassandra," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mind if I join?" I forced a smile, though my heart pounded. "Of course, Amelia. Everyone's welcome." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Good. Because I wouldn't want to miss this. I didn't know what she meant until she climbed onto the stage where the DJ had been playing, grabbed the microphone and turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying through the night. "Isn't this an incredible party?" My cousin Cassandra really outdid herself. "But before we celebrate too much, there's something you should all know." The crowd hushed. My stomach dropped, because I knew, whatever she was about to do, it wasn't going to be pretty. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about parties anymore. This was war. "Before we celebrate too much," Amelia's voice echoed through the night, "there's something you should all know about our dear hostess." Gasps rippled through the guests. Some leaned forward eagerly, others exchanged curious looks. The sea breeze carried the tension like electricity. My heart hammered. She hadn't even spoken the words yet, but I could feel the weight of the knife about to plunge into my back. Amelia smiled. Sharp, predatory, almost gleeful. "Cassandra here has been parading around as though she's the queen of this estate. She hosts, she flaunts, she glows with all this borrowed glory. But," she paused, letting the silence grow heavy, "what if I told you she didn't build it? That she didn't earn a single brick of it herself?" The crowd murmured, voices rising in sudden speculation. I clenched my jaw. Of course. Of course she'd go there, Amelia continued, her tone dripping with venom. "While she was busy throwing her little soirees, do you know who actually gave her the means to buy this place? A man she clung to. She didn't climb on her own, she was carried." Laughter snickered in the background. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned into the drama like it was the highlight of their evening. My cheeks burned, but I forced myself to stay still, composed. If I showed weakness now, Amelia would win. I stepped forward, my heels sinking slightly into the sand as I mounted the stage. I stood inches from her, my voice steady. "Are you finished, Amelia?" Her eyes sparkled with triumph. Not quite. Because everyone deserves to know who they're really celebrating. A fraud. A woman who was nothing more than a shadow until she latched onto someone else's success. The murmurs grew louder, sharper. I could feel the crowd tipping, leaning toward her narrative. And then, something inside me snapped. I grabbed the microphone from her hand. The weight of it felt electric in my palm. I looked out at the crowd, meeting their eyes one by one. "You know what's funny?" I began, my voice calm even. "Amelia thinks she's exposing me, but she doesn't realize she's actually revealing herself." The crowd stilled, the murmurs quieting. "Because yes," I said, my tone sharp as glass. "I didn't start with privilege. I wasn't handed anything. While Amelia was being celebrated for every little milestone, I was shoved aside. While she was being adored, I was being mocked. My family told me I would ruin events just by showing up. A ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. Guests who'd heard the whispers, who knew my family's favoritism all too well. But I didn't crumble. I didn't bow. I built. I worked. I sacrificed. And yes, sometimes I leaned on people who believed in me, who helped me when no one else would. That's called partnership. That's called resilience. And if Amelia thinks that makes me weak, I turned, my eyes locking on hers. She's more delusional than I thought. The audience clapped, hesitant at first, then stronger, until applause rippled through the beach. Amelia's face drained of color. She hadn't expected me to fight back. And one more thing, I added, raising my voice above the clapping. This house? This event? This life? I didn't steal it. I earned it. Every signature, every deal, every hour spent proving I was more than what they said I'd ever be. So if anyone here thinks Amelia's tantrum makes me less deserving, the door is right there. I pointed toward the edge of the beach where lanterns lit the pathway back to the parking lot. A hush swept over the crowd. No one moved. No one left. Amelia's lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her husband tugged at her arm, whispering urgently, trying to pull her away. But she yanked free, her pride too big to retreat. "This isn't over," she hissed at me, her voice trembling with fury. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming." She stormed off the stage, her gown dragging through the sand like a wounded flag. The music kicked back in, hesitant at first, then louder. Guests clapped, cheered, and soon the party roared back to life. Some even raised their glasses to me, calling my name, praising me for standing tall. But my hand still shook around the microphone. Because Amelia wasn't wrong about one thing. This wasn't over. That night, long after the last guest had gone and the music had faded into the waves, I sat alone by the fire pit. The flames danced, their light flickering against the dark ocean horizon. Her words echoed in my head. Fraud. Carried. Nothing without someone else. It didn't matter that I'd turned the crowd in my favor. It didn't matter that I'd won the battle. The war had only just begun. And if I knew anything about Amelia, it was this. She wouldn't rest until she destroyed me completely. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd already been through hell. I'd already survived being invisible, mocked, dismissed. I knew how to fight in the dark. The question was, how far was I willing to go this time? 3 days later, the answer came knocking, literally. I opened the door to find a plain envelope on my porch. No return address. No markings. Just my name written in jagged letters. Inside was a single photograph. A photo of me at a business meeting with a man I recognized immediately, an investor who had helped me secure one of my first deals. But the photo was cropped, angled, twisted to make it look like something else, like something scandalous. And scrawled across the bottom, in Amelia's handwriting, "Let's see how your precious reputation holds up when this gets out." My stomach dropped. She wasn't playing games anymore. That was when I realized this wasn't just about family, rivalry. This was about destruction. Amelia wasn't satisfied with humiliating me at dinners or parties. She wanted to erase me, and if she thought I was going to let her, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The firelight flickered across the photograph in my hands. For a moment, the air seemed to grow heavier, like the entire world was waiting to see what I'd do. Amelia thought this photo, this threat, would shatter me. She thought whispers and shadows could undo everything I had built. But here's the thing about people like her. They never realize that the harder they push, the more they reveal about themselves. I smiled, slow and deliberate as an idea began to form. The next morning, I made a few phone calls. Not to lawyers, not to family, but to every single influential guest who had attended the beach party. I invited them back, this time, not for a celebration, but for a small, exclusive business announcement. The kind of event no one in our circle would ever dare to miss. By sunset, my estate was once again filled with curious faces, glasses clinking, whispers floating like sparks. And just as I'd planned, Amelia and her husband showed up. She wore another dazzling gown, her chin lifted high, but her eyes darted nervously, searching for the angle of my trap. I walked onto the stage with a calm she didn't understand. I held up the envelope, the same one she'd dropped on my doorstep, and the crowd fell silent. "Before I begin tonight," I said, "there's something important I need to share. Something that could easily be twisted if left in the wrong hands." Gasps echoed. I slid the photograph from the envelope, held it high. The image of me and the investor gleamed under the lights. "I received this anonymously," I continued. "It was meant to destroy me, to suggest things that aren't true. But instead of running from it, I've decided to show it to all of you myself. Because that's what integrity looks like. Because I refuse to be controlled by threats and lies." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked impressed, others shocked. But every single eye turned toward Amelia. Her face paled. I let the silence linger, then added, "And if anyone is curious about the source of this—" "Perhaps you should ask my dear cousin, Amelia," the crowd gasped. All at once, voices erupted, sharp and accusing. Amelia's eyes widened, her lips opening to deny, but before she could speak, her husband stepped forward, his face crimson with shame. "It's true," he blurted, his voice cracking. "She sent it. She's been obsessed with ruining Cassandra. She won't let go of this feud." The room fell into chaos. Guests whispered, judged, shook their heads in disgust. Amelia stood frozen, her perfect image crumbling before their eyes. I stepped closer, my voice low but cutting. "You wanted to see me humiliated, Amelia. But instead you exposed yourself. And tonight, in front of everyone, the mask comes off." Her eyes brimmed with tears of fury, but no words came. No excuse, no explanation, just silence. One by one, the guests turned their backs on her. The same people she'd tried to impress now walked away, leaving her standing small, alone, diminished. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need revenge anymore. Because Amelia had destroyed herself. I closed the night with a smile, raising my glass. "Here's to truth," I said, my voice steady. "Here's to resilience. And here's to never letting anyone tell you who you are." The crowd cheered, glasses lifted high, music swelled. Laughter filled the estate again. As for Amelia, she left in silence, her gown dragging through the sand like the weight of her pride. And I? I stayed, surrounded by people who finally saw me not as a shadow, not as a fraud, but as the woman who stood tall no matter how many times she was pushed down. That night, as the waves crashed gently against the shore, I finally felt it. Peace. Not because I won, but because I no longer cared whether Amelia ever admitted her defeat. The truth was enough, and the truth was mine.